All right, welcome to our tactical Q&A number 2. If you are watching this for the first time, you should know that this, especially if you're watching this on YouTube afterward, you should know that this was originally recorded on Twitch with a live audience who is participating in the event. So some of the things that may be asked or some of the things that may be discussed might even be more discussed in depth in chat. So next time, if you would like to join us, you should follow me on Twitch and you should join us. They'll send you out an email and if you follow me and set the notifications and you can come join us and be part of the discussion. So you should also be aware that I take questions out of the Twitch chat as well as from our patron subscribers, and the patron subscribers' questions come first. So if you would like to get your question answered and you want it to be the first one talked about or one of the early ones talked about, then you should support us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/chainattacktv. You don't have to give us much. The default donation is $1 per stream. I stream about 2 to 4 times a month, so I mean $2 to $4. Anyway, so we're going to get started here. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat, although I may not get to them because we're going to get some of these other ones first. So our first question is from Simon Withers. He says, a quick demo of some of the line of sight, hills, intervening models, rules interactions that we talked about on the Chain Attack Dojo episode a month or so ago would be good to see. So let's start with that one. He's got a second part to his question, but I want to start with that one. Okay, so line of sight. Line of sight in Warmachine is dictated almost entirely by 2 things. Base size and obstructions. So, or forest, terrain. So if we take elevation out of the equation, I'm going to remove this hill for just a second. You're always tracing line of sight. And I have my mammoth here who's beautifully painted by Red Model Painting. And I guess I should mention some of our sponsors as well. I'm talking about it. These Muson Minis forest templates, and then we have some trench templates over here. And this mat was done by Frontline Gaming. You can get all these things on discountgamesinc.com, who's also our sponsor. So I appreciate all the support you guys give those particular companies from us. So here's a good example. I'm going to set up my mammoth here. He's on a huge base, and then I have 2 jacks here that are in base to base. They're large base, and then I have the scrap jack here behind them. And we're going to talk a little bit about line of sight. So a lot of people, when they're first starting the game, they get a little confused. They think, okay, well, I'm on a larger base, I should be able to see things. So they wonder, well, this large base, or huge base, excuse me, should be able to see this medium base behind these 2 large bases. And that is not true. It's actually the opposite. This model cannot see here, but this model can see here. So you can use that to your advantage by using the appropriate base sizes to hide things. However, the funny thing happens when you add in elevation, and this is the part that people were a little confused about and that changed a lot of things. So if we move this hill in here and put the mammoth on the hill, now the mammoth can see everything on the table. There is nothing, doesn't see through the forest and the obstructions, but when models are concerned and you're tracing line of sight, a huge base on a hill sees through everything. The reason being is the rules say that a model on huge base, model on a hill, ignores intervening models except for those within 1 inch of the target, and then additionally he ignores those if his base size is equal or larger. So a lot of people get tripped up. They think, okay, well, this is within 1 inch of these 2. Mammoth shouldn't be able to see me. Well, the mammoth ignores the intervening models and models within 1 inch if he is equal or larger base. So if these were 2 colossals or 2 battle engines on a huge base, he would also ignore them to be able to see, in this case, the scrapjack. So that's why letting a huge base get up on a hill lets them see basically the entire board. The only thing that's going to block line of sight is going to be forests and obstructions, things you can't see through at all. So like this, these swordsmen here, Praetorian swordsmen, if I put them over here behind the forest, now the mammoth cannot see those Praetorian swordsmen while he can see this scrapjack. Again, if I take the old witch and place her behind that building, the mammoth cannot see the old witch now that she's behind that building. So, some ways that you can do things. So, let's do it with something a little bit different, because this one is where it starts getting tripping people up. So let's say that I have the old witch. Let's pull her out, put her over here, and pretend that she's someone like Lilith too, because this is a common situation where people get caught by this sort of thing. Okay, so they will. Let's use this Grey Lord as my caster. So I have a Grey Lord Turnian here that we're going to use as the caster. And then we're worried about Lilith 2 shooting us down, so we're going to put a line of troops in front of us. And without this hill, Old Witch here, looking at that Grey Lord Turnian, cannot trace line of sight, because these guys are all the same model size as this model, the target. So they block line of sight. However, you put the Old Witch on the hill, and now she can trace line of sight to the Turnian. Okay? And she can trace line of sight to the Turnian because she ignores intervening models, including models the same base size as her, so all these Praetorians, same size. So let's do a little bit different scenario. Let's use these Man-O-Wars. They're on medium bases. So, okay, they're farther than an inch away from the Grey Lord Turnian. She ignores them because they're on a lower elevation than her. However, if they were within 1 inch of the target, she could not ignore them to trace line of sight here. However, a lot of things, can change. Let's do something like this. Okay, now she can, and the reason she can, I don't have a good straight edge, and I'm not sure you guys can see the laser on the stream very well. But the Old Witch from here ignores this model because it's more than an inch away from the target along the line that we're tracing. She doesn't ignore this model, but all she's got to do is have one line from any part of her base to any part of this model's base to be able to see it. Okay? So those are some things that you need to keep in mind. You can abuse them, or you can get abused by them. So one of the things that I've seen happen before is my opponent, especially this happens very commonly with ranged assassination threats against Kane 2, Lilith 2, anything like that. So my opponent will want to try to block line of sight, and they'll have the hill on their side, and they'll be in this situation. They'll have 2 models here, and they're like, oh, well, I'll just back up. Well, let me put them a little farther forward. They're like, oh, I'll just back up and I'll put my toe on the hill here so I get elevation, and these 2 are going to block line of sight to me. They just made a major, major error, because now I can ignore these 2 models because this model's on a hill. So tracing line of sight from models not on a hill to models on a hill, the models that are not on the hill ignore all models intervening to see the model on the hill. So in this case, regardless of what I have in front, I'm going to even use these 2 jacks, my Banshee and my Drago. They are blocking line of sight normally until Old Witch backs up and puts her back toe on the hill, and now this Grey Lord Turnian, this guy, Scrapjack, doesn't matter, whoever, they all can see her. Everybody can see her behind the forest. So that's normally a mistake, and I see that mistake quite commonly. People think, oh, I'll just toe on the hill, and that'll give me elevation, and I'll still have line of sight blocked, and it'll protect me. Instead, it just opened everybody up to be able to attack you. If you're going to do that, the way you do it is you put these guys on the hill as well. Okay, so now I can't ignore those 2 jacks because they're also on the hill. Okay, I can ignore all these models down here. So if there was a line of troops up here like a shield wall troop, this model would still be able to see Old Witch if these guys are not on elevation. But once they back up, go onto elevation, now you can't see her. So, okay, some more things about line of sight. Some things that I've seen people do incorrectly. So here's a good example. Let's pretend that I'm playing Khador versus Rhett, and I have this Banshee on the board, and I have Drago on the board here. And let me move this stuff out of the way. Okay, so line of sight is traced from any part of base to any part of base. How do I set this up and make it work?
remember you not kicking butt.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
There we go. So any part of base to any part of base that is in the front arc. So here we have a Banshee whose front arc is faced right here, and this is the forest, so can see all that. Normally wouldn't be able to see over here. However, because we trace from any part of base to any part of base, this line from back here to there goes from the Banshee to Drago. So I can fulfill that part of it, and he's also in my front arc. So now I have line of sight to Drago. Okay, that seems a little wonky, but that's the way it works. Any part of base to any part of base, and in the front arc. Okay, so I can give him focus, he can charge Drago. So that is one thing that I've seen people get caught up on. It doesn't come up very often, so people don't realize the way it works, but that is the way it works. And that actually didn't always work that way. It used to be different. And the reason it changed, I don't know if you want to say changed, but the reason it was clarified is because there was a time where, and I shouldn't even get into rules that don't even exist anymore, but I'll tell you why it changed. So this Banshee has a ranged attack, okay? If I can see Drago behind that wall, okay, the way cover used to work, I could turn so that my front arc was faced like that, and the arc was, the line of sight was traced out of my front arc, and it never went over this cover. So I could take my opponent's cover away by turning my jack or my caster or whatever away from the terrain. So that no longer works because I still trace line of sight because he's in my front arc, and I can trace any part of my base to any part of his base, but there is a line that goes from my base to his base that covers the wall. So from the back over to here, even though the wall is not in my line of sight, he's still going to get cover. So that's why that changed. It has a little bit of a wonky effect, I guess, with the way this forest works, but it's better for the game. That's the way it should work. So any part of base to any part of base. So again, in this situation, because the back of the base to the front of his base can trace it, and he's in my front arc, I can see him and charge him. So, okay, so let's see, what else do we talk about line of sight? Let's talk about arc nodes. This is a great example right here. We got an arc node with Old Witch and Scrapjack. So let's talk about stealth, because this is the one that we talked about during the episode, and a lot of people screw up. Do I have a stealth model here? Let's do Iris. She's a great example. Okay, so we have P Iris here. Okay, so let's do this. Throw this forest out here. That's going to help as well. So we have P Iris here and this forest. So people get confused about how eyeless sight works on a caster or an arc node when dealing with a model with stealth. So the thing you need to remember is that line of sight is traced from the arc node, and therefore modifications that happen because of eyeless sight happen here. If the arc node has a line of sight, or has eyeless sight, excuse me, there are certain things that happen. So let's give two examples. Okay, let's say we have two clouds here, okay, that block line of sight. If I have eyeless sight on my arc node, I can trace line of sight through these clouds or through this forest and see my target. So let's say I'm trying to cast a gallows. And I'm here, and for some reason, I don't know why, the Scrapjack has, well, this is a good example because augury actually sees through those. So with the Old Witch, augury allows her to see, or for her jacks and her to see through this forest. So I can target her. However, she has stealth. I don't know where I did not bring my measuring tape. So she has stealth, so my point of origin, which is the arc node, is greater than 5 inches away, so the attack automatically misses. So I can see her, I can trace line of sight, so anything that does line of sight tracing and blocks line of sight, unless you ignore it with eyeless sight, needs to happen on the arc node. However, to ignore stealth, I need to have eyeless sight on my caster, the attacker. So the attacker is the one that's going to ignore stealth, the attacker needs eyeless sight, not your arc node. Arc node needs eyeless sight to trace line of sight through clouds and forests. Attacker needs eyeless sight to be able to hit a model with stealth, with an attack through an arc node. However, there's a way you can get around it, and some people get caught up on this too. If the point of origin is within 5 inches, Now you do not need to because stealth says if the point of origin is farther than 5, you automatically miss. We've exceeded that problem. We've taken care of it. My arc node is within 5. Now I can arc onto it. So if you need to arc from farther than 5 inches away onto a stealth model, the caster needs eyeless sight. Because the caster is the one that makes the attack roll. Anything that modifies the attack roll happens here. Anything that modifies line of sight happens at the point of origin here. Okay, so here's another good example, same sort of thing, line of sight. Okay, where is my hill? Okay, so my arc node is on a medium base, it's on a hill, and my iris is hiding in the back, but she's within 5. Let's move this up a little bit so that we're within 5. Okay, so now because my arc node is on a hill, I ignore these models to target here. Okay, this is a situation where the line of sight is being drawn from the arc node to the target, and the modification of line of sight happens from here. Doesn't matter the old witch is not on the hill, doesn't matter the old witch is a small base trying to target through other small bases. What matters is that her arc node that's on a medium base is on a hill, can see through these models into here. It doesn't matter they're within 1 inch, because as we talked about earlier, this model is equal or bigger size. So I'm going to take questions, I guess. Yeah, let me look a little bit here on what's being said. They're talking about fields of fire. Yeah, let's talk about that, because a lot of people get that screwed up as well. So line of sight on a colossal. So here's a good example. Okay, I've seen this one multiple times. So we got a colossal here with his arcs, got him faced straight forward, he's got his left arc and his right arc, and this model is here. Okay, so I can trace from any part of my base to any part of his base, so from the outside edge of my base to there, and he is in this left arc. So from there to there. So I can totally target him. Okay, that is a question I get all the time. Can I target him? Yes, you can. He is in your arc, and he is in line of sight. Two different things. They're not the same. In line of sight, in arc, even though it's behind a forest. You can totally target him and shoot him. So that is an important thing to talk about. That comes up way more than the example I gave with the forest in the front arc like that. That is a lot more common, and people get surprised by that. They think the colossal can't target them. It totally can. So, all right, let's move on to the next question. Our next question is also from Simon Withers. He asks, how do you position to protect your caster from assassination threats like Butcher 3 tricks, Bradicus's port, and B-back, and even someone like Chromac with his advance and leap? So on the dojo, we talked a little bit about our crit acronym, which was CAMP. I can't remember all of them. Camp, range, I think, is the second one. So the biggest thing that you can do against a caster that has beat back and leap and all those other things, there is no replacement for distance. So they're not going to be able to get you if you're out of range. There's no amount of shenanigans they can pull to get to you if you're out of range. And I think people play too far forward. I'm guilty of this as well. You know, you think, you know, you're going to line up, and I feel lost without my measuring tape. You're going to line up here, and you're going to advance. So Old Witch advances 6 inches first round, and you get to about here. You know, you deployed here, you advance here, and then, you know, next round people are like, well, you know, the game is moving forward. They just start advancing for no particular reason whatsoever. You know, they move their caster like, oh, I'm going to stand on the hill because that would give me a defensive bonus. No, that was a mistake. With most casters, there's no need for you to be up there. There's really no advantage. The additional 6 inches of being farther back keeps you out of threat range, and there is no tactical tips or tricks to avoiding these sorts of assassinations that are better than distance. There's simply not. I don't know what to tell you guys. I think too many people are looking for, you know, how do I defend against this, and they're standing here and they're like, well, I keep getting killed. Well, get away from it. Back up. Get away. So kill box. Let's talk about that, because sometimes you can't get away. The kill box is, 14 inches in from every edge. But there's still a fairly large amount of area. Do not be afraid. There's too many people that stay centrally. I'm gonna go grab my measuring tape because it's gonna drive me nuts. Anyway, there's too many people that stay centrally that want to think that they're gonna control the board by staying central. But the truth is they are being detrimental to their own game. So if you are central on the board all the time, that's normally good, but in a kill box scenario against one of these casters that's going to try to corner you, you need to be willing to spend a turn running. Get away from them. So let's pretend that this Butcher 2 model is Butcher 3, okay, and he's standing centrally. Okay, don't stand straight across from him. You don't have any need to. I mean, maybe you need to for feet, but honestly, there are a lot of times you can be just as effective by moving farther away. So right here, in this example, I am 12 inches away from Butcher. I am dead. If I run 12 to there, let's check kill box here. I'm going to be in rough shape because he's pretty far forward, but yeah, see, I can move all the way back to there. And now, still in the kill box, and now I've put 17 inches away, still in trouble, but at least he's got to find some more things to do to be able to get to me. So, and I'm still as far forward up the table, still have a fairly big impact on the table, but I am not directly across from him. Don't be afraid to move laterally. Okay, let's talk a little bit about mullet carn, sidestep, beatbacks, how you defend against them. We'll use Drago as the example here. We use Old Witch as our models. This is what I see people do, okay? They spread out, they think, well, if I spread out enough, I'm going to not be able to be killed. Let's use this tack core. And they'll do stuff like this. Honestly, to a sidestepper, if he's far enough forward, that looks great. Like, that is perfect. So let's give an example with Mullet Karn, because he does this better than anybody. So Mullet Karn, we'll put him right there. Okay. So that Drago is going to represent Mullet Karn. This is our Old Witch. These are some models that we spaced out trying to avoid the sidestep death. Okay, we're playing Makeda, Epic Makeda over there. So Mullet Karn gets Rush and Road to War. He's now speed 10, he charges 13, and he's got a threat range of 15. We won't even talk about Leash, because that would add another 3 inches to it. But let's just pretend that he's going to charge 13. So he's going to charge this model here. Okay, so he's got 13 inches of charge range, which puts him right there. Actually, he's going to come up short. Anyway, he can charge so that his front arc is towards the back of this guy's base, and then he'll turn to face. He's going to hit that guy. He's going to move 2 inches with his sidestep move. He's going to attack here. He's going to move 2 more inches with his sidestep move. And I actually came up, my placement on these models was, I came up a ½ inch short, but if, for example, he's able to charge this model, then he can sidestep to here, sidestep to there, sidestep to here. You know, he can get in. And most people don't realize how far this needs to be. So this needs to be more like, depending on where he's at, I mean, 7 inches is a good example. That's a good distance. However, let's pretend you've got your guys 7 inches out away from your caster, and Mullet Karn has, I don't know, I don't need to measure this a little bit, but let's pretend he has Savagery. Okay, so he's playing against P. Makeda. Mullet Karn has Savagery and Rush on him, which means he can advance 13 inches. So in this case, you're not safe at all. Even though you've kept nobody near you, you've moved all your models away from your caster, he's going to move 13 inches. That's not even 13, but he's going to move to the back edge of that guy. He'll swing on him, hit, and then move 2 inches to here, and he's on your caster. So it depends on Mullet Karn's positioning, how far away these guys need to be. And this works for beat back and all those other things, just on a different scale. And it depends on if they have reach and stuff. But if they can advance, if they have to charge in and they can only get to the outside edge, this is plenty. If they can advance past and then attack and move in, it's not enough. I mean, anytime that you have two inches there, plus 2 inches there, I don't have another 2-inch marker, but another 2 inches here. So anytime they have that distance, which is 7 3/4 inches essentially, it's 6 inches plus the size of a large base in this particular case. You know, he can sit here, swing there, move 2 inches over, and then swing with 2 inches out there. And so I think a lot of people get caught by that because they misjudge how far that is. I mean, look at that distance there. That's the distance that Mullet Karn can cover with a single sidestep. So if this guy's here, he can sidestep to there, and you can make this even farther. So let's go like that. Go about to there. So now Mullet Karn comes in, hits that guy, sidesteps to there, swings there, sidesteps, and now he's on your caster again. So beatback works the same way. You got to keep models away from you, or make them go through enough models that they're not going to have enough attacks left over, which doesn't necessarily work with Bradigus. Chromax Advance and Leap is really just a knowing what his threat range is and just staying away from him. You know, you can measure your control area at any time. Just make sure you're not within range of his Advance and Leap. There is no advantage stronger than distance. If you can't get models on you, sometimes taking up space against a leap, you know, keeping models away, but it really depends on the situation. So, anyway.
I never understood with this game, right? It seems like distance is...
Okay, so let's go on to the next question. We're going to talk about a question that Chad Jarman, asked. He says, what is the best way to use an extremely fast jam unit that has AD like Statixis Raiders so that you can get the best mileage out of them and not just throw them away to your opponent? So I'm going to use these Swordsmen as my equivalent jam unit, although they're pretty horrible at it. Sure, Mr. Flanzer is going to disagree with me, but I think they're a bad jam unit. Okay.
Dude, I had sushi for the first time. It was like one of the worst experiences ever. Bad sushi.
Okay, so let's throw some terrain out here and pretend that these guys are an advanced deployed jam unit. So we're going to put them out at 13. We'll pretend these guys are Statixis Raiders. I see a lot of people using Statixis Raiders as they don't quite use them correctly. I think they think that the idea of a jam unit is just to run at their opponent. And that is not completely true. Okay, so let's pretend my opponent is playing Ossian with a couple of jacks. Okay, so we've got Ossian on the other side of the table, we've got Statixis Raiders over here, and we're going to want to use them to jam our opponent, keep him from being able to shoot at us. So in this particular situation, we've got 3 pieces of terrain on the board, and we need to think about where our opponent's going to go to. So is he going to try to get to this trench? If so, we need to threaten that in a defensive position that keeps our jam unit alive, but within run range. You know, it'd be cool if you can get to charge range, but it is absolutely necessary that you keep them alive to be able to run to engage against a ranged unit. Against melee, that doesn't necessarily work, but you want to put them, the jam unit needs to be in position where they're going to be defended fairly well. So we have a couple options. If we go first with Statixis Raiders, we might try to get to this trench. Okay, we might try to get to this other side of this building. You know, a lot of people play jam units as though, okay, I have to get a charge with them. So their idea is just I run as fast as I can to get to try to quote unquote, they think they're jamming. So let's pretend these guys run, we'll do with captain, they'll run 16. Okay, they'll just run up here, be like, all right, I'm running at you. That's what jam units do, don't they? They run. Okay, and then their opponent will figure out a way to get all these guys dead, and they'll be like, my jam unit was awful, my boom howlers all died, my Styx's raiders all died, and it was not worth my time. Well, it's because all you did was run at your opponent. Let's do it a little differently. Okay, Styx's raiders are a great example, like with Asphyxious 3. They've got Ashen Veil on them. The best place for them on the board is on a hill. So if they're running, we don't need to go the full distance. We just need to get into threat range and be very difficult to kill. And these guys can all sit on the opposite side of the hill. And you can spread them out a little bit so that they won't be able to come in and hit multiples with, say, a unit that has 2 attacks or whatever. If they don't have any attacks that, in this case, Styx's ignore blast damage, but let's say they have an AoE style of attack that doesn't do blast damage. If they don't have anything like that, you can get pretty aggressive on the front end of this hill, as long as they don't have something that can come in and hit multiple models with single attacking models, such as gators or something. We can all sit on the front side of that. Now we're threatening, these guys threaten a 14-inch charge, so, now we're threatening, so if he moves forward at all, he's going to get charged. He can take shots at my Styx's raiders on a hill with Ashen Veil on them, but he's not going to hit, not unless he gets lucky, and that's okay. I'll lose 1 or 2. That's all right. The point of the jam unit is to put table pressure on him, force him to either take attacks that are valuable attacks that would go on to cheap models, or to put him in a position where he can't really advance. So on this board, if you're going first, you probably want to get that trench. If I were going first with Styx's raiders, I would go directly for that trench, and I'd just fill this trench with Styx's raiders. Now I've got cover, and I would probably put a bunch back here. So this is our officer, so officer back here. In this case, actually, because it's a trench, I might actually, depending on what threats he has, I might actually put the Sea Witch in the trench with them, because it makes her a hell of a lot harder to kill. I would keep the normal unit leader centralized, which is a mistake I see a lot of people making, so that if the Sea Witch dies, I still have everybody in command. But these guys, they have such long threat. There's no reason these guys need to be any closer than 9 inches to the front. This guy can be a little bit closer, because if they kill the witch, I want to keep everything in command range. But these guys can be 9 inches back. Now, I'm threatening with 6 guys, which is more than enough to cause him headache. I'm keeping these 5 guys alive. It's going to be very difficult for him to get range on them without basically just advancing into range of these guys. And I'm in a very defensible position. So next turn, depending on what I want my jam unit to do, whether it's charge or they want just to run and engage, I'm going to do those things. So I see too many people using their jam unit as, I'm going to get every inch possible on the board to be able to jam them. They think that the only pressure they can put in scenario situations is to be completely in their face. That's not the case at all. These models can project threat onto the board, and that's how you put pressure on them and defend these scenarios. You're going to force them to bring models into you, which you can then destroy with your leisure and choosing the models you want to do it with, and then you still have the scenario pressure. There's no need. I had a guy at Gen Con 2 years ago who, top of 1, had his, what was it, 7 plus 16, 23. Oh no, he went second. Sorry. So 16, 26. He had ran his Styx's raiders basically to there, and my guys had ran forward. So they were basically, oh wait, no, sorry, 6 inches farther. Forgot about it, advanced deploy. So 16, 32. So they were here. Basically, he ran his Styxus Raiders, and he had them like this, basically in a line, and they were engaging some of my own models. I was playing Epic Hexorus, and I had no reason not to just feed and take them off the board, which is what I did. I feeded, cast Ashes to Ashes, killed half of them, feeded, killed the other half. There was like 1 or 2 Scragglers left over, and then I used some other models, killed those, and he basically handed me his jam unit. Okay, and there was a forest on the table, and while it keeps them from being able to charge the next turn, it does allow him to run them to actually get into melee with me and then force me some issues. He wasn't even in melee really with me. They were just out in front of me. So this is sort of a bad example that I was talking about, because Epic Hexorus almost always has an Extoller Soul Ward. He's going to run his Bonded Beast up. Bonded Beast is going to have the Extoller Soul Ward buff on it so that it has Ghost Sight. It'll see through the forest, and then Hexorus will arc Ashes to Ashes on him anyway. So there's kind of a lost unit. He didn't have a great option for them. But they have such long threat range. In that particular case, he could have taken his jam unit and said, okay, this isn't a jam unit in this particular matchup against Epic Hexorus. They're just going to die. I can leave them way back here as a flanking unit, and after the initial attack happens and my opponent no longer really has the resources or the effort to be able to deal with these, then I bring them in. Then they can run in, then they can charge in, then they can commit to the fight. Just because they're a quote-unquote jam unit doesn't mean they need to be up in your opponent's grill all the time. So anyway, I don't know if there's anything that needs to be said about jam units. Jam units are a lot better when they have reach. Or they have medium bases that can't be knocked down. Medium bases are good jam units because they can't be trampled. So Styxus Raiders make a great jam unit because they're fast, they have reach, so they can spread out. So here's a good example. So these two, that far apart, they've got reach. I got them a little too far apart, but you put them there. Now a model can't really go through there with free struck. We'll use the old witch here. So I can take 4 Styxus Raiders and cover 22 inches of the board, something like that, more than 20 inches of the board. Now, if he kills this one, now I've got a big gap. But sometimes that can be pretty hard with a jam unit. I mean, if we've got, Boom Howlers aren't a good example because they don't have reach. But I mean, Boom Howlers, if they're on medium bases and they're closer to each other and they've got like heightened reflexes on them or something, it's like you're not guaranteed to kill the Styxus Raider or the Boom Howler or whatever it is. That's what makes the jam units good, is it's hard to remove that model in the way, and they can start spending too much attacks. And eventually they'll probably get it, and they'll still get off what they were attempting to do. So in the case of the Styxus Raiders, okay, let's say that they really, really want to come down this lane. They put a ton of effort in to kill this Styxus Raider. She's got Force Barrier, they got ranged attacks, they're trying to kill her, and that's hard for them. Eventually they're probably going to do it, and you'd be like, oh crap, they got through, and this Banshee came through and charged whatever. Well, sure, but the part you're forgetting about is all the models he had to use to kill that one model that was in his way. That's what a jam unit does, and if you can learn to do that, you'll get a lot more effectiveness out of your jam units, and you'll be able to deliver the important models, the models behind the jam unit, to the target. Okay, so let's go on to the next question from the Patreon subscribers. Mark Savak asks, now that you've been back playing Warmachine, can you give some advice on choosing how much focus to give a Warjack? How do you evaluate what the Jack will do, weigh the buffs, etc.? I'm also interested in how you position a heavy to set up the peace trade. My heavies are usually in a sea of dudes, and I feel they are usually either too close or out of position. Okay, so heavy trading. Let's talk a little bit about focus allocation first. So focus allocation is nothing more than math, okay? What's the percentage chance that I hit, and then what is the average amount of damage I do? So let's see, we're gonna put out the old witch out here. Got Drago coming in on a Banshee. How much focus should we give Drago? Okay, so Drago's a good example. Drago's mat 7. Banshee's defense 12, needs a 5 to hit. So let's pretend he's going to have to, he charges for free. So he could charge for free without any focus. He only needs a 5 to hit. We have a, where's my app? Sorry, I do not know the percentages perfectly. This is why in the dojo we gave you a printout so that you can have it in front of you. But I have an app that's no longer available, so don't ask. So he's mat 7 against defense 12. He hits 83% of the time. That is not worth boosting. I'm going to assume that I'm going to hit on the first, I'm going to assume that I hit on the first 2 initials. Okay, I'm going to hit 4 out of 5 attacks. So comes in on the first initial, misses, whoops. Now I'm screwed because my math is all off, but let's pretend he hit. So he comes in, charges for free, he hits with the first one, he's power strength 16 against armor 18, so on average, on a charge, he's going, armor 19. Anyway, I don't remember, let's pretend he's 18. Comes in on a charge, on average he's going to do 8 damage. So a lot of times I will set dice out while I'm doing math in my head and say, okay, first attack does 8 damage. Okay, so then he swings with his second attack. He's mat 7 again, needs a 5. Most likely he's going to hit. Now he's only going to do 5 damage. Okay, because it's not boosted, not a charge. His chain attack, bloodbath, swings again, he's going to hit. Again, he's going to do 5. So without any focus involvement with Drago, he's going to do 18 damage. This guy has 28 boxes, I believe. Might have 30. So we are 12 short. Okay, so I need, in this particular situation, even though I've hit a bunch of times, I need to probably give Drago 3 focus to make this happen. Okay, 1 more, we'll do 5 more, 5 more, 5 more. So at this point, 18, if I buy 2 attacks, I'm going to do 10 more. He's going to be at 28, which might kill him, but I don't want to leave him alive. However, I guess in this situation, he's a jack. As long as I take out his cortex, I'm probably okay. Or take out both of his weapons, I'm probably okay. So maybe I only give him 2. But it's with Warmachine, it is always a gamble. How much do I want to give? Am I willing to accept the odds of failing? So, in this particular case, if I give him 2, here's something a lot of people don't think about. If I give him 2, we've talked about these 3 attacks, his first initials because he's got a chain attack, and then we're going to add in these 2 additional attacks from focus that I'm going to use in yellow dice. So we have charge, second initial, chain attack, bloodbath, buy. Normally that's probably going to scrap that jack, but as I mentioned before, 83% chance that I'm going to hit. That means 1 out of 5 times I'm going to miss. So now you're pretty certain was going to happen, came up short. A lot of people come up short and they're like, well, why did that happen? Well, I missed that 1-5, and they start blaming dice. No, what happened was you didn't give him a 3rd focus to guarantee the last hit to kill him. Okay, so math is important. That's why models like Iris to remove buffs, Gorman to apply rust, Ragman to apply Dark Shroud. That's why those 2 points are such a big deal. So let's say I have Ragman in this list and I put Ragman up there. Let's redo this math. So here the first one comes in, it does 10. The second one comes in, it does 7. The third one comes in and does 7 more. All I'm doing is adding 2 to each roll. So now we have 10, 17, 24. Now I only need 1 focus. Hope I don't miss the 1 attack, but 7 more will scrap him. So 2 focus that I saved that I could be using for something else if I can get just a 2-point change in the attack. So a good example is Hand of Fate on Drago. He loves Hand of Fate. Vlad and Hand of Fate make him a killer. So that's why what seems like in your head is only 2 points turns into 8 points on the table and can make the math completely different. So If you want to be a good Warmachine player, you need to be great with odds. I don't think it's as big a deal with Hordes. If you're a great odds maker, great guy that can do these percentages in your head quickly, then you can do well with Warmachine, with allocations, with assassinations. Warmachine has a lot of power in being able to play the odds. It's a risk game with a high reward if you do it well, whereas Hordes is more of a risk game on whether or not a beast is going to frenzy. And honestly, most people don't think about it. They just go in full bore, and then when they're done, they pay the consequences of the frenzy. So these are odds you have to think in your head before you even begin the turn, because you got to pick how much focus am I going to give out. So really nothing more than math, honestly. Need to know your opponent's stuff. It helps if you know how many boxes they have. It helps if you can adjust that damage with say a Kiss of Lilith, a Dark Shroud, a whatever it is. Insight's a good example. Anything that can add +2 to hit or to damage is +2 to hit and damage is huge. Insight's a huge important spell. So. Then let's talk about, he asked about positioning heavies. He said he always felt like his heavies were either jammed up or out of position. So I think that the biggest myth that players get in when playing this game is that their heavies need to contribute from an early point in the game. So Mark asked me, how to position, but I'm going to flip this around and say, you're doing it right already. Because he said, my heavies always feel like they're jammed or out of position. That's fine. So heavies start becoming more and more important the later the game gets. I don't know if you guys, I talked about, I can't remember whether I gave a name to it, but it's, I wrote an article about the effect that you have on a game the later the game gets. So the example I used was the Totem Hunter. So the Totem Hunter doesn't really do much early game. He might kill 1 or 2 models, and if you commit him early, he will die. The later you, Iris is one of the best examples. The later the game gets, the more her value is, her intrinsic value. So, she's a 3-point model, sure. Early game, she's a 3-point model. Late game, she might be a 25 or 30-point model. This little model here might close out the game for you. If he catches your opponent's catches your opponent's caster against Warmachine, it's probably game over. You probably just won. This model goes from being a 3-point model to maybe a 50-point model. The only model that matters. Jacks have this same situation, okay? Early on in the game, you commit them early. You may have only got 5 points out of it, or maybe you got your 10 points out of it, but the later the game gets, the more value they have out of them. Colossals are a great example of this. The later the game gets, the more that guy gets worth. So how long can you keep him alive? How quickly can you eliminate the threats to him? Your Jack is jammed up and he's not in position, that's fine. Keep doing what you're doing. He's going to stay in position, wait until late game, then he's going to commit. And if you do it right, he'll commit on a Jack that's already injured, a War Beast that's already lost a few aspects. He's going to kill it without problem, without a lot of resource investment. And now you're going to be able to, maybe if you do it right, you might even be able to get in scot-free. So I might come in with the Sphinx, kill Drago, and now my opponent doesn't have anything in the area that can deal with the Sphinx. So I'm guaranteed to be able to use him next turn. So too many times people want to get their Jacks too far forward and they're worried about them being jammed and not committing early game. Honestly, they don't need to. What you need to do is keep them on the table until there aren't enough threats to those Jacks left. Then they can start running amok. Then it takes 2 or 3 turns for your opponent to kill them or more, or they can't kill them at all in the case of a Colossal or Gargantuan. So don't get so... I know I'm not going about it. The answer to your question, I'm doing it differently than what you wanted, but I think you're doing it right. If your Jacks are jammed up, they're not in position, honestly, that's probably better than not being jammed up and being too far forward. So, how do you initiate a peace trade? this is a difficult topic because some factions initiate peace trades way better than others. Factions that have a long threat range with high damage output can initiate peace trades way better than slow factions that can't do. If they can do high damage output or high armor, they can also initiate. So a lot of times, if you're slow, in the case of Khador, if you're slow, what you need to do is try to get them to commit their jacks on something not your Khador jack, honestly, because if they commit on your Khador jack, your defense isn't high enough, your armor's not high enough, you're usually going to lose. So what I want to do is get him to commit this Sphinx, on these guys. Okay, so now he's going to kill these two, that's fine, and I'm going to initiate a peace trade that involves him killing models that are not up to value on his model. That's how you do it if you're slow. If you're fast, you just have to get into a position where, you know, this isn't a good example because neither of these guys are super fast, but you just have to get in a position where this Sphinx is going to be able to charge ridiculous range on Drago and kill him flat out. Okay, now I've initiated a peace trade. He's going to have to try to come in and kill my Sphinx, and I'm going to put this Banshee back behind so that whatever he sends in to kill, Banshee goes in, kills. So now it's just like chess. I've sent in a pawn, he takes that pawn with his rook, I take his rook with my bishop, whatever it happens to be, and I came out ahead in the peace trade. I lost a pawn, he lost a rook. Okay, there's no fancy explanation for peace trading that's different than chess. It works exactly like chess. You need to remember that these guys make great pawns. These guys make great pawns. If you can pull in if you can trick him and bring in a heavy, and thinking that his heavy is the only thing that he can use to kill those models, and then you place your heavy out of total threat range, but within threat range of the model he might go in on. A lot of times they won't take the bait, and that's okay. That's what the game is about. That's why it keeps going on round after round until you get in a position where other threats are taken care of. So in the 2-jack versus 1-jack situation, all the other threats on the table are taken care of. I don't care if I lose my jack to Drago here. I send in the Sphinx to here, he can't get there, he just runs up, and now my opponent has a choice. He can either kill my Sphinx and lose Drago to the Banshee, or he can back off and give me board position with the Sphinx, which he probably won't do, especially if he doesn't have any other threats. He almost has to commit here or he's going to lose even more next turn, and now I just come in and trace that. So I lost a jack, he lost a jack, we lost equal point values, and in the chess example we both lost rooks or whatever it happens to be, but now I have my second rook and he doesn't have any more on the table. So that's peace trading, and that's why it's important, and that's why it doesn't come into play until late game, and that's why you should be careful when you commit your jacks and beasts. Okay, so that was Mark's question. Let's go to the last Patreon question, and then we'll go to the chat room and we'll take some of those questions. We're running out of time pretty quickly here, but I want to cover at least several of those. So Christopher Tatro asks, any tips when you have to go second and have a slower army? No. It sucks. Sometimes you have to take an attack on the chin, and you need to be prepared to do so. Anything you can do to minimize that. So trolls are a pretty classic example of a force that has to take it on the chin a lot of times. That's why the stone is such a good example, or such a good model for it, and why tough can be so integral into a good, or not into a good, but into how your game plays out. So let's throw out a couple of zones here, because usually zones are why you have to move forward, and they're usually what gets you into trouble. So let's do incoming, which is a painful scenario usually for slow forces. Okay, these places are not exact, but you have one closer to your opponent, one closer to you. You can score defensively on them. So your opponent goes first, they run up, they're near the midline. You have really very little choice. They've used their speed against you to force you to basically have to advance into their threat range. So there's some things you can do. One of the things that Jason Watt loves to do with his Satrati, let me use these Man of Wars as a good example, is he will get into a zone and he will line them up a lot like this. So you'll see people do shield wall more commonly like this, or even like this. That's not uncommon. That's a lot of time you'll see Satrati played that way. Jason Watt, if you watch him when he does Satrati, a lot of times he'll move them in a position like this. So he's gotten, in this situation, I've gotten 3 Satrati into the zone, okay, and I am using my own threat range, my own reach, my own melee range to keep people from coming in on the back model that's still in the zone. So rather than spreading out, sometimes you can use a column. That's a good example of a way to, especially with a shield wall unit, that keeps these guys safe, makes it difficult to get past this lead guy. Guys have to come in on it, and once you get a couple of guys, so I mean, I don't know if you've thought about this, but when they're lined up like that, and your opponent comes in to try to kill this lead guy, they've created their own roadblock to being able to get to the back guys. They send in guys to attack the first one, he dies. Now getting in on these second ones becomes more difficult. They've got to come around. So you're using your positioning to force them into a situation where they're going to block their own stuff. So there's a good example. I'm trying to think of a few others. Trolls, a lot of times, are going to have to just give up models to make sure you can't score. You can send in, these are small base models, excuse me, I don't have enough medium bases out, but you can, separate models out, put a guy back here on the hill, so these two are both in range, and just make it a lot more difficult to try to kill them, to be able to get into a zone and dominate it. You really have to take it on the chin a lot of times. It is not whether or not you take it on the chin, it's how you take it on the chin. So stuff like this, stuff like making sure you get your stone covering all your guys, making sure that you get models off the table that would remove your tough or whatever. I mean, it's different from force to force, but you really need to think, okay, he's got these models over here, he's got Nis over there, and there's a forest here. What can I do? There's a forest here and there's Nis behind it. What can I do in this zone that mitigates those Nis in a way that can still take it on the chin? So Warders are a great example against Nis. Warders can move in. Warders don't care about Nis. Nis would have to do big CRAs to do hardly any damage, or even on a charge they're not going to do much. So making sure you line up the proper matchups on the table is a big part of being a slow force. It's really hard to flip-flop sometimes because you're a slow force, but because you deployed second, you need to use that advantage to the maximum amount you can. Use it to make sure you place your good matchups. The Warders go against the Nis, and the Bomber goes up against the Chaosy Assassins, or whatever it happens to be. You need to make sure that they're lined up correctly, because if they're not lined up correctly, then when you try to commit to these zones, you're just gonna get destroyed. So there's my tips for going second. That is all the questions we have from the Patreon subscribers. So I'm going to go to chat here and see if I can't find something to talk about for a little bit. All right, let's go back up a little ways here. Okay, so
That's your own choice, man. That'd be so cute. That's not
there's a lot of comments about stuff we talked about. Let's see, Gorbat asks, since we were talking about movement shenanigans, how about admonition and similar? In terms of stopping them or preventing your opponent stopping them, is it just not giving your opponent enough space to place additional models around you? So let's talk about admonition, enliven, and abilities like that. So enliven's a good one. So enliven, let's talk about how to stop enliven first, and then we'll talk about how to keep it from being stopped. So let's pretend this is a Menoth jack. My opponent has put enliven on it. He's assumed that enliven is going to be enough to save him. I have a heavy that's in range. I don't want to go in and just attack him, have him walk away, not be able to kill him, and then I lose my heavy in a really bad piece trade, as we talked about before. However, I have some errants on the board that look like swordsmen for some reason. These errants can do two things. They can either charge or run, or just advance in this situation because they're close enough. But whatever it is, what you want is to get one guy, and this, you're not going to be able to see this really well on the camera, but what I need to be is base to base to him, but past his front arc. If I get two guys past his front arc, but not out so they're taking free strikes, but just past his front arc, so the middle of my base is, is past his front arc on both sides. Now I can send in the heavy, as long as I can get to base in the front, or at least close enough, he won't be able to back up. Okay, geometry says there's no room. Okay, if you're going to do this against an opponent, you might want to clarify that with him so that he agrees, because you might have some people who don't understand geometry and be like, no, I totally got room, watch. And they'll bump the models and work their way out. You're like, oh, that's not really how it works. Anyway, so just barely past center line, behind him, still in his front arc, so you don't even really have to weasel your way around. Now he can't go anywhere to get away from when he enlivens. So, admonition. Let me start over. Let's talk about admonition on how to make, or enliven, on how to defend against somebody trying to take it away. So enliven's a good example. You actually probably want to leave space in front so that you could potentially enliven forward if they make a mistake like shooting your jack late in the round and allowing you to advance on their caster. But you also need to defend against the sides. So that's how you're going to lose your enliven, is by having guys come in on the sides. So putting your own guys, half inch out or so on both sides, but in those spaces so they can't come past the center line, that's going to defend you, and it allows you to move forward. So two guys like this, you can have more guys out here, whatever. They may still be able to beat that, but it helps these guys have reach. Now when he comes in, he doesn't have a lot of options. He's going to hit you, you're going to back up, or you're going to move in on his caster. That's how you defend against people trying to stop your enliven. He still has options. He can, with that situation, all he has to do is run, say, one guy back to right there. Now you're sort of stuck. So as long as you keep him from being able to do that, kill the models that could run into position, your enliven's going to be good. Admonition. Admonition's a real pain in the ass because it's something that your opponent triggers, not you. And because it's unpredictable where he may take the model. So we have Ossian here with admonition. Ossian's got admonition on this Banshee. And we want to be able to kill that jack with Drago in this particular situation. There's no great answer here. Sometimes you have to be a little bit willing to go with the flow. You're going to want to try to force him to trigger it. So if you have something else that can charge in, get him to trigger it. In this situation here, he'd almost certainly back up, but that's okay. Now you've reduced the threat. He can't come in on you. Now maybe you just back your jack up instead of trying to go in. But there's not a great answer on admonition other than forcing your opponent to trigger it. Optionally, the other option, something that you could try, it's a little bit risky, but if you have a model with Grand Slam, this will work well. Anything you can do to knock them down. So pretend this is a gladiator, and I've got a bronze back there or something. This bronze back, let's say he runs to there. So he's, we'll get him a little closer. So he's probably within about 4.5, 4. But he's not going to make attacks because I ran with him. So this guy knows that he's probably not going to admonition at that point. Now we have the gladiator go. He slams. He needs to stop at least farther than 6 inches away. So we'll see if I eyeballed this correctly. I did. So he's about 6 1/8 away. So Now he's going to slam this model. He has super slam, so he gets plus 2 inches. So the minimum he's going to go is 3. I need to roll a 2 or better. I'll go 4, knock him down. He can't stop because of the admonition. Now I've got to get a way to kill him. So I've already committed 2 heavies. Oh, maybe you use a cav model or something for this particular situation. But and you have to have a super slammer. I mean, if it's not that, you got to get lucky. You need to roll. In this situation, I'd have to roll at least probably a 5 to get to him. So not a great plan. Is an option. Colossals, gargantuans work great for. So if I had this mammoth out here, I'd walk my gladiator over, stay out at 2 inches, stay farther than 6 inches away, pick that guy up, throw him into here, and then I've got to send something else in to charge. So anything that can knock down, anything that can remove upkeeps, anything that can force him to trigger admonition before he wants to. I mean, those are the things you have to do. Admonition's a pain in the ass, and a lot of times when they trigger admonition and back up or whatever, you just have to accept that now they're going to have to recast admonition, and you're going to maintain your board position. A lot of times that's more than enough. Admonition, maintaining your board position, and waiting for a further turn, because chances are next turn he may not even put admonition back out. He may be like, well, I don't have enough resources to get admonition back out, and I need to accomplish this and this turn, and then you get a chance to come in. If you just recast it, you just have to keep, it's a playing cat and mouse with them over and over and over again. So. Okay, so let's see what else questions I got here. Okay. The next question is, how did I get my beard to become so goddamn glorious? I take care of it and don't cut it. Taking care of it is a pretty big part of it. Glorp asks, is there anything in Trolls that deals with caustic mists? I can't think of anything. They're called slag trolls. They don't see through it, but they are immune to it, and they can hand out immunity to it. I don't know if that helps you at all. I mean, there's not really a great way that I can think of to just deal with it. Bombers move out to the edge and hope they deviate behind it, so you can get that bile thrall back there. There's not a lot of great options. Honestly, what I would do is put, in your Crix matchup, you should have a slag troll. So put the slag troll animus on a couple of models. Again, do the charge thing that I talked about in the Q&A number 1. You can charge into those clouds and then take your secondary attacks on the models behind the cloud without having to worry about the damage. Give you guys one more chance to give me any questions, and we'll move forward with those. If not, we'll just close it up and we'll do it again in a month. I hope you learned something today. I hope that this has been informative and of value to you guys. It's kind of funny. A lot of the tactics that I talk about on this stream I don't use in play. You sort of get tunnel vision and forget about these things, so it's much easier to talk about them on a table setting like this rather than talk about them in a game or look back on your game and go, well, I should have done that. Well, yeah, you should have done that, but you don't think about all these things. So don't beat yourself up if you go to a game and you're like, oh, Trevor told me to do this, but I didn't do it because I'm a dummy. Well, Trevor's a dummy too. Trevor makes the same mistakes. It's easy to talk about these sort of things in a casual setting without a clock going, without a tournament going on. And then when you get in a game and you start having all the potential issues in your mind of what can happen, you forget all the best plays and you do the best play that you can think of, which isn't that great. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any additional questions, so maybe we'll close it up for today. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your support.